welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And joining us live is John Lester today. He helps organizational change makers reinvent their sales processes so they can keep clients longer, get recommended more often, and upsell and cross sell on a more consistent basis. Welcome to the show, John.
AJ, thank you very much. I am very happy to be here and very excited about getting into this aspect, this conversation. Guests, I hope you're ready for a long one because there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form.
Thank
And I'm
you.
sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about sales. And also, you will try to answer this question, why is selling getting harder? So, John, you have spent a lot of your life into sales.
Yes.
And we have progressed in terms of technology, in terms of the insights about human buying behavior and everything. And you say, we are talking about why is selling getting harder. Help us understand, why is it so? The population has risen. There are many more requirements today, and
Yes.
selling is getting harder. Help us understand, why is it so?
Great question. We will get into that. And what's interesting is that there are a number of facets that we're going to talk about. This is not a single answer. So anybody who's listening to this, take out a pencil and a paper and maybe start to write these down, but don't think that there's a single silver bullet to solve this. There are not. So there's a few things that are going on. And what the audience needs to understand, AJ, is that at least in the United States, sales percentage of quota achievement, which is really what you look at in sales, overall across all markets is decreasing. So percentage of quota achievement is decreasing on an annual basis. So even though we know more, we have more technology, closing rates are decreasing. So you're saying, well, what's going on? Why is sales getting harder? Why are people not making their quota? There's a few things. We know so much more about buyer behavior. We understand, and everybody has seen this. If you go on Amazon, one of the things Amazon and any of these sites will do is they'll say, oh, you have bought these things. And what we found is that people who have bought these things also would like to buy these things. Would you like to buy these things? So we understand buyer preference. We understand the decision-making process. We understand how people think. We understand, how they react to stress, how they react to offers, how they react to time. The buyer of, let's say, the baby boomer generation has an ability to stay focused, if you will, for 15, 20 minutes. We're just going to use rough numbers. We're not going to use exact numbers. The youngest generations now have average attention spans of something like 23 seconds, 40 seconds. So few things have happened. One, we've learned a lot more about buyers, but since we've learned a lot more about buyers, we understand how to communicate with them and how to manipulate them through technology. Now, since you can do that through technology, you really don't need people to do that anymore. So where are we seeing that? We're seeing decisions being made by buyers in a digital fashion. And a study done by, I believe it was Google many years ago, actually tracked the way people made decisions, and they looked at the time that they had the notion of, maybe I have interest in this, to the time that it took them to make a decision, and realized that through the use of their phone or through the use of a digital device, you were able to compress that time. It's fascinating study. So you have this notion of, we understand how to get to people's yeses quicker, and we understand how to do it through technology, obviating the need for people. Now, business really has only one obligation. It is to make more money at a reduced cost. So if I'm paying somebody X number of dollars, but I can do it from a technology perspective for a third of that price, why would I not do it? The business actually has an obligation to do that. Now, this hurts people, but again, businesses by design aren't necessarily in the business of helping their employees. They're in the business of making the money or achieving the objective that they set out to. Many people don't want to understand that, don't want to believe it. Okay, but that's the way businesses have been structured. So it's getting harder also because if you look at most of the education, most of the sales training that goes on, all right, the sales training is comprised really of two things. It's comprised of this notion that you have to understand your product. What does your product do? How does it do it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't talk about how does your product add value. We don't teach how does your product add value. We teach what your product does. And then the other thing is we teach sales training tactics, how to get to yes, always be closing, right? Ask 3 questions where they're saying yes, so that when you ask them the 4th, they're immediately going to say yes. These are outdated techniques, outdated philosophies that just don't resonate with the buyers anymore. But yet, if you go and look, and I use Amazon always as an example, so I'm not, you could do this on any site, say, what are the most popular sales? You're going to find some of them that are professing knowledge that came out 20 years ago. That's not what's going on. Now you add the last piece of that, which is the piece that I'm trying to work through. You add the last piece to that is that people are more and more stressed. And this came out so badly at COVID. Um, we're still not over COVID. I was just sitting with a friend of mine. He said, "Well, how long have you been doing whatever it was that we're doing?" And I said, "I've been doing that 6 years." And he goes, "Wait a minute, it only feels like you've been doing it for 2." I said, "Yeah, we lost 3 years from COVID. Our brains have basically written off 3 years from COVID, which is very scary." So people are so stressed that what happens is they tend to shut down. They tend not to want to examine reality. They tend not to want to find out what's new and what's working. And they revert to what I call mental models. And it's not my term, but it's the programming that we have that started probably when we were 2 or 3 years old and has progressed through time. Right? Oh, I can't trust these people because, when I was 4 years old, my father said, don't trust these people. I don't even realize that's happening. Right? There's certain, and I don't want to get into politics, but Republicans will say, oh, all Democrats are bad, regardless of the policy. And Democrats will say, oh, all Republicans are bad. And you have the same thing in your political parties in every country, right? But not stopping and thinking, what does that mean? Why am I reacting to it? So I'm going to take a breath because I told you I can go on forever about this and see if what questions you think that our viewers might have or you might have.
Right, right, John. Uh, One thing is that you also talk about that in sales, your prospects are not aliens; they are humans. Is that one of the reason that you have trained your mind, or also you have trained the customers by messaging them indirectly that you are only treating them as numbers, some sort of aliens whose money you need to squeeze out of their pockets, and you have forgotten the human part? Help us understand, is that the main reason that in spite of every effort that you are making, sales has become much more harder for you?
It is a major factor, AJ, but it is not the main one. But let's go back, because remember, we are not acting out things that society has given us yesterday or the day before. We tend to be acting out things that society has given us 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It's just the way we work. And traditional sales training, why do you hire a salesperson? Because you need sales, which means you need to, and this is a big word in sales training, you need to convince somebody else to do something. Well, outside of my wife telling me what to do, which I don't need convincing on, I don't need somebody coming into my head and telling me you should do this, you have to do this. I don't need that. But salespeople have typically been trained, and now this notion of being trained that way spills over to solopreneurs who think, "Ooh, what am I going to do? What is my reaction to sales?" All right, so they're thinking, okay, I've got to go and I've got to convince this person. I've got to push this person. I've got to get yeses out of this person. All right. That person isn't the person. That person is a number. So I need X number of deals. And if I need X number of deals, I need X number of conversations and X number of leads. And you start to see people as numbers. And then they said years ago, they started to say, oh, well, you know what? What is the persona? All right, so now I'm going to categorize person, and you, AJ, are unique. You were created uniquely. You have continued. Everything in your life makes you different every minute. But I'm going to put you in a bucket that I'm putting 100 other people and say they have the same persona, so I should treat them all the same. There's a major disconnect from the very beginning when your perspective as a salesperson is that those 100 people are going to react exactly the same. That's not to say there aren't similarities potentially, and we should understand those as salespeople. But to sit there and say, that's how I'm going to approach this person, how do you know when that person woke up this morning that their child wasn't sick? How do you know when that person woke up this morning that they didn't have a migraine headache? Right? We don't know all of these things. So we go in and we go, oh, I'm going to build rapport with this person. I'm going to treat a persona and I'm going to close the deal. It's not working, dude. It's simply not working. And that to me is one of the biggest reasons. Again, it's not the buyer that's the problem. It's our head that's the problem. Does that help?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, in terms of, what is it that, salesmen, sellers must know about the buyer? What is it that customers want now? What is it? Do they want the product? Do they want value? Do they want better service? Do they want more empathy? Do they want to, other party to treat them as human beings?
It great question. And I would say I wouldn't look at any of those things because every buyer is unique. And this is a notion. I can't remember who brought it out, but this is a notion that I swear by and use my entire life. There are two decisions that are made in every deal. Okay, whether we like it or not. The buyer is making a personal decision. So
Right,
it's called a PBM, a personal buying motive, for their own reasons. And it has to do with what they want. Maybe it's recognition. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's just to feel better. We don't know what it is until we ask. But then they have to take, when they make the decision that they want to buy, then they need a DBM, a dominant buying motive, which is a rational buying motive that they can use to justify this to whoever they have to justify to. Sometimes it's themselves, interestingly enough. So the seller has to be aware of, first of all, because they before they go in, they first have to understand what the dominant buying motives for that particular type of customer, that particular problem set that they're solving. They have to understand what that is, and they have to be well versed in that as it relates to the buyer's rational business problem. But then they have to be able to delve into the buyer enough to understand why the buyer is trying to make a decision. And I think most of the time when you wind up with buyer's remorse, which is when somebody buys something and they back out of the deal later, it's because they bought based on the dominant buying motive, the rational buying motive, but had never satisfied the personal buying motive. A little complicated. It's not easy to do this. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But again, I think that the biggest shift that a seller can take out of this conversation is you're selling to another human being, and every human being has problems, fears, anticipations. They have everything that you have, they have it too. It's just different. And when you stop for a second and realize that there's a person at the other end that is trying to make a decision for their personal benefit and then trying to justify it, and they don't know how to make these decisions because they don't do it every day. I mean, we don't buy the same thing every day, yet we sell the same thing every day. Right? So when the seller understands that about the buyer, it changes the tone of the conversation, changes the stress level on the seller, and the seller can just relax into the sale.
absolutely. So, there are several reasons for salespeople to be under a lot of pressure,
Mhm.
under a lot of stress, and so many people do not want to do the job. But
Correct.
you seem to be loving the job more than 40 years into this, and you also say sales can be the best job you ever have. So
Yes.
help us understand through this. A lot of people will understand how can you make it the best job for you. Secondly, why do you like sales so much? So that people can start liking it a bit more and make it a better livelihood for themselves.
Now, great question. So if you go back to what I just said, an individual is trying to make a decision based on something inside of them that needs to be satisfied. Now, when you do this right, and sellers who do this will recognize this right away, there is a moment in the sale before the person even says, yes, I want to buy that, where you can see their face change. You can see the smile come on their face. You can see their eyes light up when they recognize that there's a possibility that what they really are trying to accomplish, what they're trying to accomplish, what they need is going to be satisfied. That's a wonderful moment for me to be able to say, yes, I helped somebody get something that they need today. Because if you really think about it, a lot of decisions, personal decisions, are based around the individual's desire and need to provide for their children and their family. It's really interesting when you start to boil it down. So if I help somebody make a positive decision to have a positive influence on their child's life, my bell rings. That's a good day for me. So I'm answering both of those questions at the same time. So when I go out to sell, my challenge to myself is, how can I help them? Who can I help? How much can I help them? I just enjoy that because, by the way, if I do that right, I also get paid. That's not a bad deal.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's the mindset that I try to help people understand. I try to get them to the point where they can have that mindset, where they get rid of all of the other garbage that's going on and have that particular mindset to go out and sell. Is it easy? No, it is not. Can you do it? Yes. You just have to practice. You just have to think differently.
Absolutely. But can this mindset be developed? Is it
Yeah.
that okay? So tell us how can they learn about this? How you train a lot of people, so how can they do it? And you also have the sales mastermind. So help us understand through that also, so that people have a knowledge or understanding of all the options that you can provide.
So you when you think about changing somebody's mind, if you believe um, s- the color red, and I tell you, AJ, you're wrong. It's really the color blue. I am never going to convince you. It doesn't really matter. And there's studies that prove this. Something like 85% of the people in one study I remember reading about um, would not relinquish their first belief, even though it was proven to be wrong on the second belief. And it's a human trait, and they just like, no, I'm not going to change my perspective. So we can't come right at somebody and go, you're wrong. This is, I think, what many spouses have an issue with. So, one says, oh, you didn't do this, the other says, no, I did, and then they go at each other all the time. It doesn't work. Okay, we got to stop that. So we first have to explore what their beliefs are, and then we have to help them understand why they have those beliefs. Now, you don't have to go back and say, oh, well, what happened to you when you were a child at 6 or 7 years old? But if you understand that the belief is there, once you understand it, once you identify it, then you can examine it. Then you can start to turn it and say, well, maybe there's truth to it, but if I look at this aspect of it, maybe I can change that aspect. So we have to allow people to discover themselves, and then we have to allow them to understand how those mental models are impacting them in a way that they really don't want. Now, if they don't want to change the mental models, we're not going to help them. Okay, but they have to say, yes, I want to change. I'm interested in a change, and we have to do that gently because change causes fear. So we have to take them very slowly through the process. We have to take them through the process over a certain amount of time because we can't change ourselves overnight. It just doesn't work. All right. And then we have to start to show them how they can put other mental models in place. So we don't throw everything out and say, okay, fine, you're cured. No. How do I take this mental model? How do I identify it? How do I replace it? And now how do I show you examples as to why it's good and how it works? It's a process. And I can usually get the core ones out of the way in about 4 to 5 weeks, the way I'm running my mastermind right now. It's not painful. It's done in a mastermind for a simple reason. We all need support to make changes. So in a mastermind, you have other people, and other people sometimes ask the questions or make the statements that either you don't know to make or are scared to make. We know this from class. We know that. I mean, I remember in grammar school, I would always raise my hand and ask the stupid question. And everybody would go, "Well, why are you asking the stupid question?" I said, "Because that way I learn. And I'd rather know. I don't really care if I look stupid. Kids picked on me anyhow, so I don't care if I look stupid. But I want to learn." So that's how we do it. It is really amazing when people start to make changes. I'll give you one change that is mandated when I run my mastermind. Even though everybody is a seller, so everybody sells that's in the mastermind, they are not allowed to use the term sales or sell. It's for very first session, it's taken off the board. They're not allowed to say it, which means they're not allowed to think it. Because what I want people to understand is that the business that they are in is not selling. The business that they are in is providing value. Now, if your brain is going sell and you have a negative mental model about selling, how effective do you think you're going to be? But if your brain is constantly saying provide value, provide value, provide value, how do you think you're going to approach this situation? That one works like a light switch. Once people start to do that, it's completely different. That's fun,
Absolutely.
but AJ, that's fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely, John. So one thing is that uh, we are talking about the sales process. A lot of it also gets impacted by the after sales process, where the salesperson is out of the equation, and the customer, if there is any issue, then they have to deal with the customer care,
Yeah,
and that is the big problem.
it's a huge problem.
And your after sales service is not good, then you will face problems during the sale.
Correct.
And no, the problem is that this after sales thing or customer satisfaction, forget about customer delight, that is, getting diminished because of either lack of empathy, because the bosses are not ready to listen to all those things. There has been more distance between the customer as the people who are deciding about products and services.
Right.
And in between they have come chatbots and robocalls and everything else. And
Right.
that is where the customers want to be absolutely sure about the product or service. Help us understand about this part. How do you bring those two things together, sales, after sales? But because for the customer, it is whoever he or she is talking to, it is the company itself.
This is a great point. This is not within the confines of what I do in the mastermind. This is what I do for businesses. What's and again, let's go back to training. Let's go back to how people's minds work. In the United States, again, because I don't know how it's done others. In the United States, when a deal is consumed, in other words, when a deal is signed, so we'll use that construct, when somebody buys something, when they give you the credit card, however you're culminating a deal, money goes into the column on the accounting sheet that says a deal is made. So when you look at any organization, what do you look at? You look at their revenue. What is revenue? Well, revenue is either a commitment or it's money, depending upon which accounting system you're using. Organizations, public organizations, are rated. In other words, their share price is based in a large part on whether or not they are achieving that monetary number on an ongoing basis. Okay. But nowhere does it say, is the customer happy? Nowhere does
Right.
it say, how long do I keep the customer? No long does it say, what is my cost of goods sold for turn, for recidivism? It doesn't talk about that. So much management, and actually, this is, if anybody's interested in this, really interesting exercise, um, is go to, it used to be Edgar. They used to keep track of all the federal filings. A publicly traded company has to file a 10K. And in the 10K, you can actually find it. It's very easy to find. You will see how the chief executive, and to a large extent how the top level management is compensated. And you will see what drives their compensation. And for the longest time, it could still be true because I haven't looked in a while, they were paid on earnings per share, which is a number that speaks mostly to, is my revenue increasing and am I keeping my costs down? There's no customer satisfaction in that number. So why would they pay attention to customer satisfaction if what they're really chasing is their bonus? So the corporations are promoting this kind of behavior, all right, through whether it's the board or whether it's the senior management, but they're promoting it. Now, what's really fascinating is there's a notion that came out a number of years ago, and it started with a question, and it said, what is the objective of an organization? And the traditional answer was the objective of the organization was to make a sale. And this person, and I can't believe I don't remember this person's name, and I know I have their book. They said, no, that's wrong. That's not the way to look at it. They said the objective of the organization should be to create a raving fan. Now, what am I talking about? What is the difference here? What it says is that from the time somebody has any kind of contact with your organization, all the way through the pre-sale process, through the sale process, through the implementation process, all the way to the point where what you're looking for is the second buy. So the upsell, the cross-sell, the second sell. Okay. How do you create an environment that makes that customer so happy to be doing business with you? That's how you create a raving fan. Why? This is what's really fascinating. Why do you do that? They are less adverse to margin. In other words, they're willing to pay more. Margin, not just revenue, margin. So after your cost cut, they're willing to pay more. Okay. They will bring you customers just by referring you without you ever asking. All right. They are much easier to do business with, which means the amount of time that you have to spend with them is less. Sorry, this is one of my babes. Come on. All right. So when you really look at it, the notion of a raving fan, if you can run the organization around that kind of a notion, revenue goes up, margin goes up, satisfaction goes up, customer retention goes up, all of the metrics go up. But it requires you to be more disciplined. And one of the things I found in the other side of the where I'm consulting with businesses, what I find is that there is no alignment of the different departments and of the different objectives of those departments as it relates to the sales process. So I give you one quick one. Why would an organization with salespeople and a sales manager, why would they compensate the salesperson differently than they compensate the sales manager? I'm not talking about money. What I'm talking about is tasks and performance. So it was not uncommon that a salesperson would have a target. The salesperson would complete their target. And we're going to use January to December as a standard year. Okay, could be different. The salesperson has structured their pipeline and their business because they know they have to hit a number every quarter. This is very traditional. And they get to the last quarter of the year and they close the piece of business that they want to close. They are at target so that they get compensated the way they need to get compensated. They get their bonuses the way they need to get the bonuses. And the sales manager comes in and says, hey, wait a minute, I'm short on my number. I need you to bring in first quarter numbers to make my number. Wait a minute, there's a disconnect with that. Because now you've broken trust with the customer where you've already set the expectation that they represent a first quarter number to you, not a fourth quarter number. So there's many, many little things like this. This goes exactly to the point that you're making. Many organizations will not have the salesperson sit in the transition meeting when implementation takes over so that implementation and the salesperson are on exactly the same page when it speaks to the customer. What is the customer's job? I mean, think about it. The customer's job is to get maximum return on their investment from their vendor. That's their job. So it is in their interest, and people shouldn't take this negative. It is in their interest to get more out of the implementation team than the salesperson promised. So you can't get mad at them for doing their job. Okay? You can't. All right? But that causes friction, internal and to the client. So people have to understand that one, what they really want to be in the business of is creating raving fans. And if they want to do that, they have to understand that the impression or what the prospect believes and how they are going to believe that they're going to do business with you starts at the very first time that they have an impression of you. It starts at your website. It starts at your marketing message. And if that impression is not consistent throughout, you cause disconnect on the part of the prospect. And a lot of times prospect leaves. Does that help? I know I got a little deep in the woods on that, but does that help?
Lot of help, and you have answered it very, very well, John. And that is why I was a bit lost into that, thinking about that. It almost sounds utopian because it was so human earlier on, but all the friction that has come into
Right.
all this process, that it almost sounds utopian, and that is the irony.
Yeah.
Because this can make everyone happy. Even the share prices will go up if the
Yeah.
customer is happy.
Even the share prices go up. It's like, why don't you do this? But again, we're trained to be very myopic in our thinking. This is a trait of America, by the way, and it's how the country was founded. All right. It doesn't really work, but it's worked for so many years.
Right. Be that as it may, I'm sure people will have to find their own way. Times
Yeah.
are changing.
Yeah.
That is why you have, even in constitutions, you have amendments so that it can reflect the changing times everywhere it is, even in India, even in businesses now. We had just had the great resignation that is saying a lot of things,
Yeah.
and now the customers are also fighting back, even though many people would like to believe that the customer is nowhere the king, no more the king, but officially the customer has not been dethroned as yet. He or she is still the king or the queen.
Well,
So
I want to bring this back to one quick concept, and everybody take a deep breath, because this is a little bit harder even to really put your head around. Um, when a seller is going into a prospect, they are going in with a solution. And historically, in the corporate side, in the better corporate sized organizations, the salespeople are trained as to the competition. In other words, who has a offering that has a similar functionality that you do. Now, here's what becomes very fascinating. The seller then believes that that is their competition relative to the buyer. Now, when they're looking at it that way, remember, they're looking at it from the dominant buying motive perspective. They're looking at it from the technical aspects, from the rationalization justification aspect. But again, what we said before is that the buyer is primarily making a decision based on their personal motivation. And what people need to understand is that the substitution effect comes into play. The buyer may or may not make the decision for your product or your class of product, but they might decide that they can get that same personal satisfaction in a completely different offering, completely different class of offering. So the sellers today have to understand that when they are competing, they're not competing against known competitors. They're competing against what's going on inside the person. And if they don't tie into that, if they don't understand that, they will get dropped from a substitution effect without even realizing that that's what's happening. Not easy to understand.
absolutely. And that is where you come into the picture. For those people who would like to understand more about this, want to be trained about this, want to be a part of your sales mastermind, what is the best way for them to learn from you and to earn better from you?
AJ, appreciate the question. The best place to go is to my website, which is Attitude Selling, one word, ATTITUDE, selling, attitudeselling.com. And the mastermind is on the right-hand side and the business is on the other side. But go to the mastermind side. All my contact information is there. I'm happy to just jump on a quick call. My Calendly link is on there. If you need me, you just book. And I love to do this with people. Just book a call with me. Let's get on the phone for 15 minutes. Let's talk about this live. You're just another human being like me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. After all, it's all about being human.
It really is. At the end of the day, it really is.
With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
AJ, thank you. Thank you, audience. Have a great day.